All right. Welcome to Essential Ecclesiology. This show exists to build the church with biblical doctrine alone. I'm Pastor Dave. We're back this morning for the third rant. I don't know if you can hear in the background. You got school buses going. You got birds chirping, dogs barking, and you got this cat just taking a nap. So he must have been up all night, up to no good. But yeah, we're back for rant number 3. We even got babies crying. So it's the morning. Torrens up officially. But yeah, we're back for rant number 3, and I want to just break down based on doctrine, based on the principles of the scripture. I want to just poke at the big church, small church mentality. Which one's better? The big church, the small church, or neither? I would say the answer is neither. I would also say, number one, this big church, small church mentality isn't dependent on us. What I mean by that is the Bible makes it very clear that it is God who adds to his church. 1 Corinthians 3 talks about this. When people are putting Paul against Apollos, Paul says, listen, I planted, Apollos water, but it is God who gave the growth. And then he says, to each person that he has assigned. In other words, if there are people that are under Apollos' ministry, God has assigned that leader. If there are those that are under Paul's ministry, God has assigned those leaders or those churches. So that's not really what most people, when we're wondering about, okay, this big church, should I go to this big church, or there's a smaller church? Should we be in a smaller church? Do we put one against the other? I don't think people are really looking at that topic or breaking that down doctrinally. I think the reasons for wanting to have a big church may not be biblical at all. Reasons for staying small may not be biblical at all. So again, here at Essential Ecclesiology, we want to build up the church with biblical doctrine. Let's say this. The first thing we should say is every church should aspire to grow. Every church should anticipate growth, should pray for growth. I don't care if you're a small church and your church can only hold 100. By God's grace, you should be praying for more sheep. We're not content with 100. Lord, bring in more of the harvest. Raise up more leaders. Those are biblical prayers, right? And there are biblical approaches to raising up more leaders, to going out and getting more of the harvest, bringing in the sheep that are out there, the lost sheep that are out there. Jesus says, I have more sheep that are out there. Go and get them. There are biblical prayers and there are biblical principles and practices for that. You can also grow a church without those biblical prayers, principles, or practices. I'm going to give you another P word here. Ready? It's called pragmatism. It's called pragmatism. This is, hey, look at what's working for Best Buy, or look at what's working for this company here. If we adopt those strategies, we'll get more people in the door. Pragmatism, while we have technology and while we have some great marketing strategies, God expects us to live according to his word. He expects us to employ spiritual practices, not rely on worldly conventional methods. So pragmatism can be very dangerous. I've seen it. You wanna get a crowd? Go invite this speaker. Go invite this guy who played for the Packers. Let's get Brett Favre here. Let's get Patrick Mahomes here. We'll really draw a crowd. Okay. Once we get him here, we got to keep him here. Okay. How are we going to keep him here? We got him here. We got Patrick Mahomes. We got Brett Favre. This is pragmatic. Okay. Now we got the people here. How are we going to keep him here? All right. Well, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this. And Jerry Wilson, I believe it's in his book Gospel Centered Church, rocked my world with this quote. He says, "What you win them through is what you win them to." Right? So in other words, if you won them through football, you won them to football. Okay? If you win them through worship team, you won them to the worship team. We're talking about what is the staying power when you have a pragmatic church? Okay? If you win them through the word, you won them to God. You won them to his word. Okay? If you win them through community, as good as community is, you essentially won them to community. So we have to be careful about pragmatism, and those are some of the things that I don't think that we necessarily think about. So what ends up happening is we get sick of our small church because it's not as pragmatic as the big church, because it takes a large budget to be pragmatic. And so then we go to the big church, and then we ooh and ah over all of the things that we can do. Over, well, they have this, and they have this, and the seats are better, and we have this. And so we create a us versus them mentality in the church, not based off of anything scriptural, not based off anything biblical, purely based on, I would just say, the flesh. So, is the small church better? Maybe. Is the big church better? Maybe. Do we need to have this dichotomy in our mind of small church bad, big church bad? Me, someone who loves to lead with my doctrine, I want to lead from principles derived from scripture, and I don't want to lead pragmatically. I'm not against all pragmatism. If you put your pragmatism first and the principles of the scripture second, yeah, there's some big problems. But we obviously live in a technological age, digital age. We should employ the things that we have that are at our disposal, leverage them for the kingdom. The problem is when you have such a pragmatic mindset that you don't lead doctrinally, but then you don't even question the ethics of your pragmatism, and you just kind of go, well, it's working, so we're not going to stop it. It's been working this long. Why would we change it now? That's a closed mindedness. That's a full reliance on the things of this world and not on the things of God. And so we never want to get to that place. I think that what we see consistently, whether the church starts small or grows big, or whether the church starts big, like in the book of Acts, the first church, you had the 120, and then immediately they became a church of 3,000, right? We wouldn't say that they were trying to be a mega church. And people that like to use that scripture to say, look at all these people, we should be trying to do all that. That's not how, that's what God did in that situation. See, the church is organic. But let me tell you this. Those 3,000 people were deep. there was not a short ceiling in that church. What I mean by short ceiling is you can only grow so much because the truth is watered down, because this place has, the church of Acts, they were deep in doctrine. They sat under the apostles' teaching, prayer, okay, the fellowship of the saints. They were practicing the one another's. They were in each other's lives. In fact, they were selling their possessions. Show me a mega church doing that. Okay, this was not a pragmatic church. No, I'm not. Am I against the mega church? No, because that's a mega church. The church in the book of Acts was a mega church in Jerusalem. What I'm against is relying on pragmatism and not relying on the principles of Scripture. The church in Acts, they weren't focused on the fact that there's deep pockets or there's deep numbers. They were focusing on the fact that there was spiritual depth. There was spiritual depth, okay? Depth before width. Now, we don't know how, this church, we do, because when you read chapters 4 and 5, you see this church starts 3,000. This church kind of explodes again. There's another revival happening. This church is like around 7,000 or 8,000 at one point before they are have to scatter. But this church started out deep, and it was that depth that prepared them for going wider, for reaching more. So as we think about small church, large church, we need to think about it biblically. And I would say that God's heart, because God's the one who adds to the church, ultimately, we should pray, God, if we have 30 people, help us to go as deep as we can with 30 people. We should want to go deeper with 30 people than to remain shallow and stunted with 3,000 people. That should be our prayer. That's how we should think about church. That means we get our preferences out of the way. We say, hey, this is ultimately not about what programs are here. This is ultimately not about who's who. What kind of socioeconomic status, what neighborhood is this church even in? We should be approaching the people of God with the mindset of, I want to go as deep as I can. If there are 30, and if there's one more that comes, God added that one. I want to go as deep as I can. And then I want to take those spiritual practices, and I want to go make disciples, and I want to go and share the gospel, and I want to transform my neighborhood. And we're going to rely on the Scripture. We're going to be anchored in the Scripture. We're going to be anchored in the practices that come from the Bible, the ancient practices of the church. We're going to be so anchored there. We want to be like Jared Wilson talks about this, we want to be an evergreen tree, a tree that stays green all year around for all time. The only way you stay evergreen is if you're rooted biblically, because everything else is fleeting and changing with the times, not the Scripture. So we want to be grounded in biblical doctrine alone. So that's my third rant today. I hope something in there made sense, because it's 7 o'clock in the morning and I'm ranting. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Stay rooted in biblical doctrine.